Welcome back. I'm Andy Parks from the Washington Times, and I'll look at this week's news and talk with Washington Times White House reporter Jeff Mordock after this. You know, as a listener to my podcast, you qualify to receive a 50% discount on an annual digital subscription to the Washington Times. Simply go to washingtontimes.com/Andy. That's washingtontimes.com/ANDY. Well, here we go again. Have to start with Joe Biden as he stumbles around the White House, lost most of the time, and even his own aides are staying away from him. Did you happen to catch the presidential address on the economy, on Afghanistan, and a few other odds and ends? Oh, it was pitiful. It was pitiful. He stumbled through it, reading it off the teleprompter, took no questions whatsoever, and exited the room. It's unbelievable. I will say this. The person or the people involved in his day-to-day decision-making are either trying to sabotage him or they're just plain simple-minded liberals who believe everything they hear. I mean, who made the decision to leave $85 billion in equipment and supplies in the hands of the Taliban? How stupid! At least destroy the stuff if you can't drag it out of there. But even more important, what about the people stranded in Afghanistan? Yes, many are stranded and have said so. It makes no difference to the presidential spokesperson and liar, Jen Psaki. When questioned on it, she flat out denied it, and then scolded the Fox reporter for asking about it. Meanwhile, CBS News, liberal allies and liars for Biden and company, tried to blame climate change for resurrecting the Taliban. Seriously? Yep, they said the lack of rain or too much rain created the problem. Huh? How far out on a limb do you have to be to come up with that scary conclusion? Oh, wait. Remember, CBS News also tried to blame large opium profits motivating the Taliban and creating a resurgence back 6 years ago. And in the past week, Joe Biden has been blaming Donald Trump for the problems in Afghanistan. You ever notice Democrats never own the problem? They just Obama-size it, as I like to say. In other words, find someone and blame them for it. Then you have the George Costanza of CNN. Yes, Brian Stilter of the reliable source. Actually, should be the unreliable source. He says the negative coverage of Joe Biden is over the top. Brian, you are kidding, right? This loser and his cronies spent 4 years beating the hell out of Trump at every turn, and now he's a typical liberal, a crying, whining baby. One more note on CNN. They attempted to cover the I Love New York City concert in Central Park, and it got rained out about halfway through. And I got to tell you, that was funny. News anchors had to scramble to fill the airtime left by the TV absence of the event. What a shame. This from the same people who beat on the Sturgis motorcycle rally and the Trump rallies. Yet they were okay bringing thousands to Central Park for a concert. And they also said nothing about the Obama superspreader 60th birthday bash, where the ex-president danced all night with the grace of a giraffe on roller skates. Backstage at the concert, while thousands of Americans and their families were trying to save themselves from the Taliban in Afghanistan, Senator Chuck Schumer was high-fiving and dancing with Stephen Colbert, another brainless liberal. It seems that de Blasio's press secretary thought he'd put out a video for the world to see. What a decision. I wonder if he's still got a job today. You know, people said that watching Schumer dance was enough to make them throw up in their mouths. Yeah, the video was quickly taken down, but it was a bit too late. Not to be outdone, while all of this was going on, Nancy Pelosi was holding a fundraiser in Napa Valley for her ultra-rich donors. I, like others, noticed that the only people in attendance wearing the all-important face mask were the servants. Again, rules for thee and not for me. She's pitiful. And finally, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has left his position, and he also left the dog behind. Captain, as he is referred to by the ex-governor, was left there when he asked if any staff members wanted the dog. But of course, this looked so bad, he had to change his mind. And thanks to the Today Show for covering his behind. Yeah, he said the dog would always be a family member. Hmm. And now let's check in with Washington Times White House reporter Jeff Mordock. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Andy. How are you today?
Doing just fine. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. One, the presidential address, if you will, slash news conference, press conference, whatever. Biden accused of bowing to Taliban on Afghanistan pullout timetable. Was anyone really surprised by that?
No, he's been adamant that he was going to stick to the August 31st deadline for a while. It sort of leaked out ahead of his news conference. It seemed like this is the direction he wants us to go. It's interesting because U.S. allies at the G7 conference pressed him to extend the deadline, and he refused. And I think it's kind of interesting because he went to the G7 meeting about, I guess it was about 2 months ago, so in June, and told everybody America's back and he's different from Donald Trump and he's going to do what the allies say, and no more of Donald Trump thumbing his nose at European nations. And then Biden comes in and thumbs his nose at European nations. I find that really interesting.
Yeah, Republicans are not happy at all, right?
No, they believe that this is going to lead to further bloodshed. They think it's an unrealistic time frame for the U.S. to get everybody out of Afghanistan. And it is. I mean, the problem is the administration keeps saying we're getting thousands of people out, and each day we're setting a new record in the number of people we got out. But they don't know how many people are in there. This administration has repeatedly, on multiple levels, refused to tell us how many Americans there are left in Afghanistan. You see it at the White House briefings. They don't answer that question. You see it at the State Department briefings. They don't answer that question. You see it at the Pentagon briefings. They don't answer that question. So I don't understand where this confidence comes from that they're going to get everybody out of here in under a week when they're not entirely sure of who's left and who's even in the country and how many of them are in the country. And Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor for the president, even acknowledged that it's really hard for them to tell who is or who is not in the country because you're supposed to register with the U.S. Embassy when you come to a foreign country. A lot of people don't. And also a lot of people register when they come in, but don't register when they leave. So the U.S. doesn't even know if these people have already left.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw yesterday at the briefing, but Jen Psaki urged the reporters, if we know somebody stuck in Afghanistan or somebody in Afghanistan has reached out to our news outlet, let them know, which really shows to me how much scrambling they're doing to try to find Americans stuck in Afghanistan.
Yeah. He met with the G7 for about 7 minutes, if I understand correctly.
It went a little bit longer. He spoke for 7 minutes, although it was not a long meeting. And it's interesting because Boris Johnson, who right now is heading the G7, the United Kingdom Prime Minister, he's been one of the biggest critics of this withdrawal plan. And he's apparent, from what we've heard, has really pressed Biden to extend the deadline, pointing out that, the original deadline was September 11th, and even just an extra week, he would still meet his original deadline. But, Biden, he's being stubborn about this. He's just not backing down from this arbitrary August 31st deadline.
Yeah. One thing that struck me as being a little funny is that he referred to ISIS-K. His worry was ISIS-K. What is ISIS-K?
It's an offshoot of ISIS, Islamic militant terror group. They are not friendly with the Taliban. They would look to undermine a Taliban government, but they also don't have any love for the U.S. either. And the threats we've seen in Afghanistan, if you remember earlier this week, there were reports where there was a potential terror threat at the Kabul airport, and they were asking U.S. citizens to find a different route to the airport or shelter in place. That threat was an ISIS-K threat. But the administration keeps talking out of both sides of its mouth here, because in one level they're saying there's no more terrorism in Afghanistan. We don't need to be in Afghanistan because we've been able to extinguish the terror threat coming from Afghanistan. And the other side, they're saying, well, we've got to get out of here because the terror threat's going to get really bad if we stay. So which one is it?
This next story is almost comical to me. Biden hosts Seattle Storm, first WNBA champs to visit the White House since 2016. Was this simply an attempt to show the American people that everything's okay at home? I mean, come on, let's face it, the timing was awful.
Oh, the timing was terrible. This administration has been completely tone deaf to the crisis in Afghanistan. And I don't think there's been a couple examples of that. To be honest with you, I don't know, this is the most egregious example. In my mind, the most egregious example was him coming out on Tuesday to talk about it and give us an update, which we had not had an update from him in about a day, on what's going on in Afghanistan and what his decision would be to extend. He spoke for 12 minutes. More than 5 of those minutes were spent discussing his infrastructure bill in Congress, his spending package, and voting rights. So if you're an American and stranded, and I know the administration does not like reporters saying the word stranded, but if you're an American and you're stranded, you hear that and you must think you're third on Joe Biden's priority list.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw Jen Psaki's reaction the other day when Peter Doocy put the question to her about people being stranded. She was insulted by it. In fact, she was mad.
She was. She absolutely was. And it's semantics. If they're not stranded, what are they?
Yeah.
And you see so many headlines, and I believe that you go to the other briefings at the Pentagon State Department, they do use words like stranded. But yes, Jen Psaki got very indignant. But back to the Seattle storm, some of this is, and I've noticed this from covering the White House, we've had 3 championship teams come, and some of these, it's really hard to schedule an event with a sporting team. You've got to wait at the White House. You've got to wait till that team comes to D.C. for something. The Storm was in town to play the Mystics. You've got to wait for their schedule. You can't really do it in the off season because players leave, players go their separate ways and train. So scheduling sporting visits is very complicated for the White House, and when they get them in, it's usually unlikely that ever gets canceled. But you're right, the timing and optics of that were terrible.
Yeah. All right, before I let you run, what are you working on?
Working on a couple of things. One of the things I'm kind of interested in now is, what is this administration going to do about Afghan president who allegedly fled with $169 million of taxpayer cash stuffed in duffel bags in his helicopter? Republicans are demanding answers.
Yeah.
The administration has yet to address this issue. I think it's really interesting that this administration is not, everybody's talking about how they won't criticize the Taliban, that they're using very friendly language towards the Taliban. They're also using very friendly language toward former Afghan President Ghani, who just fled the country. And, a lot of people are saying took taxpayer dollars with him. So U.S. taxpayer dollars with him. So it'd be interesting if the administration takes a tougher stance on that, if they're even going to look into whether criminal charges are warranted. That's what I'm looking into right now.
Okay. Folks, you can read all of Jeff Mordock's stories at WashingtonTimes.com. As always, Jeff, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Always enjoy it.
Thanks for joining me today, and remember to receive a 50% discount on an annual digital subscription to the Washington Times. Go to WashingtonTimes.com/Andy. You'll get 24/7 digital access to the Washington Times at 50% off. Again, go to WashingtonTimes.com/ANDY. I'm Andy Parks. Have a great day.